Shalom Avracha. Le'chava Yerushalayim, ela al she'midu divreim al din Torah. These words, written by, quoted in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua in the Gemara of Mitzvah, are nothing less than fantastic. They're incredulous words, difficult to believe. The Gemara says that Yerushalayim was destroyed because he'midu divreim al din Torah, because they established the din Torah, the letter of the law. And the Gemara immediately expresses wonder. Which law should we be implementing, if not Torah law? Didn't the Magister or some other Avodah Zarah oriented law? Says the Gemara, the meaning is like this. L'chav Yerushalayim was destroyed because emidu divreim al din Torah, the letter of the law, le'asu lifnim mishuras hadin, and they didn't go beyond the letter of the law. Meaning the problem isn't the din Torah. The problem is that they didn't go beyond the din Torah, beyond the letter of the law, and they stuck to the boundaries. They stayed within the boundaries of din Torah. And nonetheless, even after this explanation, the original statement, the original wording of Rabbi Yehoshua remains incredible. It remains difficult to believe. Yerushalayim was destroyed because they midu divreim al din Torah. It has a certain shock value. It's a wake-up call. This is why Yerushalayim was destroyed. And how are we to understand this? Even after the Gemara explained, really it means the letter of the law rather than doing beyond the letter of the law. But even this is bewildering. Why should Yerushalayim be destroyed because of a deficiency in lifnim mishuras hadin? Is the letter of the law not in itself something very worthy? Is Yerushalayim worthy of being destroyed because of a lack of lifnim mishuras hadin? But we find a similar idea in this week's parasha. The pasuk says, "V'asiso hayasha v'atov b'nei Hashem Elokecha." Do the just, do the right, the good in the eyes of Hashem, Hashem Elokecha. And the pasuk says that if you will, this is a condition. The pasuk says, "For uvasa v'yirashtai sa'aretz," you'll inherit the land. Asher Hashem Elokecha, Hashem nishba Hashem la'avesecha. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised our forefathers, meaning a precondition. Inheriting the land is contingent upon asisa hayashar v'hatov. And what is asisa hayashar v'hatov? Says the Ramban, Rashi mentions it, the Medrash brings that it means lifnim mishuras hadin. Again, entering the land, inheriting the land is contingent on lifnim mishuras hadin. The statement isn't quite as extreme as Rav Yochanan's wording, but it comes to the same. Being in the land, inheriting the land, having binyan Yerushalayim, is contingent on lifnim mishuras hadin. And we ask why? Why is this such a central idea? I think the understanding behind this very far-reaching principle is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to know the Torah, to learn halacha, to know the law. And knowing the law, knowing halacha, knowing how to act, how to behave, by definition, depends on knowing the boundaries. Every law, every normative statement needs to have boundaries. When does it apply? When doesn't it apply? What's the letter of the law? What are the boundaries? Where are we within the law and where are we outside of the law? And in halacha, that means there are some things that are mutter, some things that are also chayav and pater, tameh and tahor. All of these distinctions are what define a halachic or any legal system. However, says Rav Yehoshua, that's not enough. The whole purpose of understanding the law, of understanding those boundaries of mutter and aser and chayav and pater, is to go beyond those boundaries. We need the boundaries first, but we need them in order to go beyond them. And the meaning is as follows. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches us through the Torah. He teaches us halacha, he gives us law, mishamayim mishmat din. But the idea of the law isn't just to perform within the boundaries of the law itself. It reveals us what's ritzayin Hashem. It reveals to us what is inherent, what values, what system, what ideas are latent in those halachas in order that we should be able to live according to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, according to his underlying ratzon, that we should be able to create, we should be able to establish a good society, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, the way that the Torah teaches us to do. And that lesson we have to derive, we have to extract from the halacha itself. Yes, halacha needs to have boundaries. Every legal system needs to operate within boundaries. But those boundaries are there in order to teach us principles, in order to teach us values, and to articulate, to be able to realize those values even when we're outside the immediate boundaries of the letter of the law. Says Rabbi Yehoshua, Yerushalayim was destroyed because of a generation, because of a people that all they had was the letter of the law. The Gemara in Yoma explains that in Bay Sheni they had Gemilas Chasadim and Torah and mitzvahs, but they had the letter of the law. They didn't have the spirit of the law. They didn't have the value system. They didn't understand the Ritzon Hashem that was latent within the law, and that's why they had Sinas Chinam. How can you have Gemilas Chasadim on the one hand and Sinas Chinam on the other? The answer is that you have the letter of the law, but you don't have the spirit of the law. And we need to have both. And that's why the Torah tells us, we need to do the just and the good in the eyes of Hashem. How do we know what's good in the eyes of Hashem? We know that by learning Torah, by learning halacha, and by understanding the values that the Torah is trying to teach us, that the Torah is constituting by means of the halacha, by means of those boundaries. I'll mention just one example because it's the example that the Gemara speaks about in Bava Metzia. The Gemara is speaking about Hashavua Saveda, and this is a classic example. The Rama even paskins that there could be a chiyuv to do lifnim mishura sadin. What does it mean? When I see somebody dropping an item, he loses it, he drops it inadvertently, and it gets lost. I find the item, but I know that al pi halacha, there's already yush, meaning he's given up hope of finding it, and therefore al pi halacha, I'm allowed to keep it for myself. What do? Do I make an easy profit and keep it for myself? Or do I think about him, the person, the owner of this item, the former owner of this item, of how this item is meaningful for him, precious for him, valuable for him, important for him, and therefore I return it to him, lifnim mishura sadin. Meaning, have I internalized, have I understood the value that's latent in this halacha, or am I sticking to the letter of the law, and because based on the letter of the law, I'm allowed to keep it, so finders keepers and losers weepers. He lost it, too bad for him, the letter of the law allows me to keep it. That's a very simple case, a very simple illustration of the principle. The Torah wants us to internalize the value, the principle, the concept, the Ritzon Hashem that's latent in the mitzvah. If we stick to the letter of the law and we don't internalize the Ritzon Hashem, the Ritzon HaTorah, then lo chava Yerushalayim ela al shemidu divreim al din Torah. And in Yirtzeh Hashem, we should all be zoicha to attach ourselves, to have a real chibur, a real closeness with the Ritzon Hashem, not just with the letter of the law. That's important. That's where we start from, but also with beyond the letter of the law. That the Torah should inform all of our ways, b'chol drachecha da'eyu, in everything that we do, whether we're within that framework of the letter of the law or whether we're completely outside of it. All of our ways, all of our life should be imbued, should be inculcated by the Torah values and by the Ritzon Hashem. And by doing so, in Yirtzeh Hashem, we should go from Afela Le'oira, we should go from the Avelos of Tisha B'Av to the rejoicing in Binyan Yerushalayim Bimheira B'Yameinu. We should all have a wonderful Shabbos.